Here's what writing in multiple languages at the same time looks like. At least that was the claim I stumbled into back when making an animation about pictorial manuscripts, and I've wanted to get into the details ever since. So today I thought I'd come back to them and practice writing these bilingual glyphs myself, ask what's going on as we read them more closely, and maybe even by the end find one way of imagining how far we could take this. So how do multilingual scripts work? At least historically in these two examples. Bilingual writing. The name alone may sound like a paradox. Isn't a written language just that? One written language? Not necessarily. And to show off why, I'll try my hand at a calendar date and a place name. Both come from old books from colonial Mexico, in the shadow of the rise and fall of the Aztec Empire. The first records decades of tributes demanded by the new Spanish authorities of a community well to the southwest of the Triple Alliance capital, now Mexico City. The second, more than a century, 102 years, of a bilingual town's history, well to the northeast of the capital. These manuscripts represent 4 unrelated languages: Mixtec, Nāhuatl, Totonac, and some Spanish. Let's read the bilingual date together first. I see 4 basic pieces, all linked to each other physically in the glyph. I'm starting out by painting the first words we read, the words for year. This outstanding symbol is often named for what it resembles in, or would resemble in the Latin alphabet, an AO glyph. An AO glyph is read as a single morpheme in Mixtec that means the year, quilla. Attached to that quilla is, well, what could have been grass, but in a slight twist, I'm following the manuscript and writing a leaf, used not for what it looks like, but for its sound. The plant is a sound-alike sign for Inxihuitl, the year, in Nāhuatl. Alongside those 2 symbols that introduce the words for year, next I'm painting circles, discs. Numbers up to 20 are written with small discs, each counted as 1. There are 3 of them here, in the manuscript painted 3 different colors, which we read as 3. Connected to these is a symbol it'll take me a bit longer to finish, but this one's here to name the year. Years cycle between names. This one represents the year house, read in each of the languages as their respective word for house. The coefficient and named year together sit at the top of a page of records dated 3 House, 1561. So the entire reading goes roughly like this. We begin with in the year in 2 very different languages, unrelated to each other in fact, and then come together to read the date itself in both, 3 House. Next example is a bilingual place name, the name of a town whose codex this is that shares 102 years of its local drama. The largest element is a bell shape. It's a very common motif in this style where it represents a hill or a mountain. There's room to insert a whole study of this mountain glyph, which may appear as a much more elaborate green hill, but this scribe simplifies the shape down to just the bell-like outline. Then the next element is a xicotl, and you can dive into the literature and decide for yourself if it's really an avispa, a wasp, or a jicote, a bee. Either way, it's meant to represent a word in the Aztec Empire's language, Nāhuatl. Put the insect together with the mountain, reading the insect first, and it's Xicotepec, at Jicote Hill. Then the mountain gets topped off with a face with wrinkles. This stands for an elderly person, but not in Nāhuatl. We're meant to read this together with the mountain in Totonac, another language unrelated to the other 2 mentioned today. This time, the mountain is read not as mountain, but a kind of location marker, and the elder is kolu. Together, kolu, at the elders or place of elders. A little sigh of a breath for me. I'm trying to cram a bunch of knowledge in there and get everything right. But this way of writing has gone by many names, including Mixteca Puebla and International style. And what style it has. It's just so visual. It makes me want to bring glyphs out of the page and show off their component pieces to you, which is going to take some artsy work. think I'll probably have to redraw them again on my pad so I can composite them together with the ones on paper, and then I just might be able to do some frame-by-frame animating. Maybe I can find other pieces from my past art and even arrange them on the table too to make it look cozier. Is that too much? As for the glyphs, well, let me try and bring it out of the page into focus so we can consider its intricacies. You might already be gaining a sense for the reading flow of these bilingual signs, but let me make it explicit. I'm imagining that there are two readers here that each are supplying words in their respective languages. Their readings diverge on signs that are each read in their own language, and then they converge on signs that are written in both of their languages at once. Since I'm trying to pull glyphs off the page, I'll commit to it. Since I'm pulling glyphs off the page, let's use these processes, convergence and divergence, to read them more carefully. Faced with the date, our two readers will enter through two divergent signs. The Mixtec speaker first reads the sign Kuya, the year. At the same time, the Nāhuatl speaker reads Inxihuitl, the year. Then both of their eyes meet on the numeral signs, supplying their own respective words for 3, and then house. And with that, each has read out in the year or just the year 3 house. And along the way, each has ignored one element in their reading, just the other language's word for year. Now the place name again. What's the relationship between its 3 elements? Well, I find the convergence and divergence trickier here personally. The Totonac speaker starts at the shared sign, the mountain. The bell-shaped hill is a place prefix, sort of in or at. And then the reader moves on to the divergent sign for elder, ending on that noun, go'olu or elder. The Nāhuatl speaker, however, flips things the other way, reading the insect first, and then the hill last, Xicotepetl or Xicotepec, producing one of many place names in the language that end in that mountain element. As both readers finish, one has read at the elders, and the other may be Mount Wasp or Bumblebee Hill. The ignored element is for each of them a very different noun in the other's language. Even the convergent hill that is shared is not read at the same point for each speaker, and represents something grammatically very different to each one. Something like a preposition, and then a noun with that locative ending. Even with just very few elements, we already see that there's some intricacies here. What's driving this? What's making this work? At a glance, my first thought is what's staring us in the face, or eyes. Iconicity. Maybe this style's multiply readable signs are driven by pictorial icons, or iconography. Pick your terminological trap here. Something feels direct, obvious, even universal. Picture this. If you want to write anything in any language, why not just draw it? Okay then, read this crab. It's a piece of conflict resolution, and it relates your household problems to your language and your culture. Well, if you spoke Congo in the mid-20th century and lived in Cabinda, this detached bit of Angola. One partner goes to a priest with problems and returns with a graphic half of a 2-piece puzzle. Its second missing half is a popular proverb the other must come up with to understand the complete message. Here she's suffering at home, is leaving, and you need to let go. More imagery in this one surrounds a central figure. She's troubled alone and is facing a wall. Below and above are these textured circles, and their meanings really caught my attention. They're fruits. Tampumbemba fruits. I can't get the tones right, but they are fruits. One fruit confirms it's a single argument, and the arguer is telling the truth. The second adds it's the end of arguments, nothing more to say. Taking this as representative, even image-rich graphic communication isn't readable ex nihilo, from no one nowhere for everyone everywhere. One half of it is our graphic imagination. The other is linguistic. It's poetic, or proverbial, that it's human relationships that mediate the two halves. Bakongo meaning-making, or meaning uncovering, isn't obvious, but requires having and acting on knowledge that draws on shared images and linguistic resources. And when I set that beside the way I told the story about reading these two glyphs, I imagined two monolingual readers, right? Each taking their own path through the text. As they read, they land on the same multiply readable signs, but they can ignore or discard foreign, singly readable signs that do not apply to them. But this isn't find your obvious imagery, pick your monolingual lane. No, here instead it's shared resources that come together to reinforce each other's readings. That's familiar yet again. More cross-cultural context and more multilingual information is helping rather than hindering. And we're back to translanguaging. Well, if translanguaging, why not transglyphing? Now, I realize I brought out a compound name and a brief phrase with a date. It's hard to connect these to the kind of writing most of us know and love. However, these processes identified, I find myself scrambling to gather more transglyphic examples and wondering who else has done this? Could we do it again? What happens if I dared to harness this and attempt to write multilingually nowadays? Will I give that a try? I'd like to thank my patrons for encouraging me and supporting this animation. And to all of you watching, stick around and subscribe for more epigraphy than I originally intended this year, and much more about a world full of languages and cultures.